It's a January night in the Kern River Valley outside Bakersfield, California, and the temperature has dropped into the low 40s, the kind of cold that doesn't kill you but makes sure you never really sleep. Somewhere off a frontage road, a man is curled in the bed of a pickup truck with a moving blanket and a dog for warmth. 4 miles away, in a gravel lot behind an auto parts store, another man is asleep in a full-sized bed, under a roof, behind a door that locks, inside a 15-year-old Ford van that used to be somebody's plumbing rig. The second man doesn't own a house. He doesn't even own the van outright. He built it himself, out of parts, and he's slept in one just like it for years. What you assume this story is going to be is a feel-good clip about a guy with a wrench and a big heart. What it actually is stranger, sadder in places, and ends up somewhere you wouldn't expect. A converted workshop in coastal Maine that has quietly rehoused more people than most city homelessness programs 10 times its budget. To understand how a broken van in Kern County turns into a factory floor 2,500 miles away, you have to go back to a kid who became a ward of the state at 8 years old. Jason Thorvagin was homeless for most of his life, by his own account, decades of it, after being taken from an abusive home as a child. He eventually landed, like a lot of people in the Kern River Valley, in a van, because a van was cheaper than an apartment and safer than a sidewalk. Around 2018, living in that van himself, he started fixing up other vans and giving them away. He called it, without much branding effort, Van with a Plan. Having been homeless for so long, I know what people need, and I know how to provide that. It's simple. You put a roof over a man's head. That's Thorvagin, in an interview with a local ABC affiliate, and it's about as close to a mission statement as the operation ever got. He bought dead vans for around $500 apiece and sank thousands more of his own money, once as much as $8,000 in savings, into beds, insulation, and storage. Then, in late 2020, he heard a news report about a veteran whose van had been stolen while his wife was in the hospital. The van, the dog, everything the couple owned, gone. Thorvagin had 2 vans at the time. He gave the man one of them on the spot, the one he was personally living in. Police recovered the stolen van a few days later. Thorvagin got his back. He'd found out, almost by accident, that he had something to give after all. That instinct, one guy, one van, no non-profit paperwork, is the seed. Ed Harmon is what happens when that same seed gets watered for 5 more years. Harmon is a retired contractor in Boothbay, Maine, a Vietnam-era Navy veteran who did multiple tours and came home with a Bronze Star he doesn't like to talk about in detail. In 2019, he was driving a friend to meetings for homeless veterans and got to thinking about the gap between the shelter is full and the shelter has an opening in 6 weeks. So I'm saying, well, why not a camper? That's the entire founding insight, delivered in one sentence, the way Harmon tells it. He converted his own contractor's workshop into a small production line. The nonprofit is officially named Boothbay VETS, Veterans Emergency Temporary Shelters, which is the kind of name a government form loves and nobody says out loud. Around town and in the local news segments, people just call them the trailers or the campers. Nobody's bothered to invent a jokier nickname, which is its own quiet detail. You mock the things that annoy you, and apparently these don't. So what is it actually like inside one of these things? A converted van? A 5x8 travel trailer, once the cameras and the local news crews leave? Cold air first, or the memory of it. These units exist because the alternative is a tent or a truck bed, so the whole design is a war against temperature. Harmon's trailers run insulated to a spec he's proud of. Good to 50 below zero, he says, and asks, only half rhetorically, how many houses can we say that about? Inside, it's tight, a single bed, sometimes a bunk, a foot of counter space, a mini fridge and microwave if the site has power, a heater that runs on household electricity, or a small propane tank the size of the ones people use on a backyard grill. There's a particular kind of quiet in there that people who've never slept outside don't register as a feature. It is one. Nobody warns you, though, about the small stuff. The propane tank has to be swapped like a barbecue canister, which means someone learns to do that, on a schedule, in the snow. A van or trailer isn't an address, and half of the American safety net, a job application, a VA claim, a package, a driver's license renewal, runs on having one. Getting that fixed is its own bureaucratic subplot most people never see. Space that fits one person badly fits two, so a returning spouse or a dog changes the math overnight. And because these are vehicles or things towed by vehicles, they get moved, sometimes to Caribou, sometimes to Eastport, the easternmost city in the continental United States, 300 miles from Harmon's shop, which means home for some veterans is also, on delivery day, a truck convoy. Here's the part the segment producers tend to skip. There's no plumbing, no toilet, no shower, no sink with running water in either the vans or most of the trailers. That means gas station bathrooms, library restrooms, whatever a nearby shelter or VA clinic will allow on somebody else's clock. It's the single largest quality of life gap between housed and sheltered, and it's the reason every serious homelessness researcher will tell you a trailer is a bridge, not a house. And the smallness itself cuts two ways depending on who you ask. For a veteran who has spent months sleeping exposed, 4 walls and a locking door is the first real privacy and safety he's had in years. The best part, described that way more than once. For someone further along, already stable enough to notice the walls, that same 80 square feet can feel like a box that's still, technically, a form of homelessness. Both things are true of the same trailer, sometimes for the same person on different weeks. A day inside one, stitched together from what the people who run these programs describe, starts early and cold. Morning is condensation on the inside of the window and the small ritual of getting the heater going before anything else. Midday is logistics, a walk or a bus to a VA appointment, a caseworker call about a housing voucher, maybe a volunteer from the Elks, or the VA regional office stopping by to check the propane and drop off the grocery gift card Harmon's shop tucks into every unit alongside canned food. Afternoon quiets down. Evening is the door, locked, for the first time that day. Night is the heater cycling on and off, and outside, the temperature doing the thing it does in Maine in February, which is to say something to a person that a canvas tent cannot survive hearing. So who actually ends up in one of these, and who's in charge? In Maine, the state's own January count found 115 homeless veterans statewide in 2024, a small number by national standards, which tells you this isn't only a big city phenomenon. Boothbay Vets itself runs with essentially no paid staff and almost no overhead. Harmon owns the property and volunteers, Elks Club members, Boy Scouts, VA staff up to and including the regional director, and, memorably, groups of incarcerated men and women from Mountain View Correctional Center and the Southern Maine Women's Reentry Center do the building. The prison crews learn real trade certifications, NCCER framing, and finish work while they're at it. Some have walked out with job offers already in hand. As of Harmon's most recent count, the workshop has produced 44 trailers and helped more than 150 veterans move into permanent housing, not just temporary shelter. A bridge, doing what a bridge is supposed to do. What stability actually buys a person shows up less in a spreadsheet and more in 3 small rooms. It's the difference in how a veteran shows up to a VA intake appointment with a fixed address to put on the form, how he shows up to a job interview without having slept in his clothes, and how he shows up to a phone call with a kid he hasn't been able to face in years. So why isn't there a Boothbay Vets in every state by now? It's worth ruling out the obvious villain first. This isn't a story about a program that got caught mismanaging money, or a funding source that collapsed, or a scandal that scared off donors. Senator Angus King secured Boothbay Vets a $339,000 federal grant in 2024, and the checks people hand Harmon range from $3 at the grocery store to 4-figure gifts. The real bottleneck is almost embarrassingly ordinary. One workshop, one 76-year-old contractor, and a volunteer schedule can only physically build so many trailers a year. 44 of them across 5 years, with 28 more queued up, and no way to speed up hand-built insulation and wiring by throwing more federal money at a single shop floor. National veteran homelessness, meanwhile, hit its lowest recorded level in 2025, about 32,495 people per HUD's count, down 56% since 2009, which means the remaining cases are disproportionately the hardest ones, the chronic ones, the ones a trailer alone was never going to fully solve. The quiet image at the end of that math is a small lot behind Harmon's shop in Boothbay, a row of finished trailers sitting in the snow, each one built and insulated and ready, waiting for the next name on a list that a single shop can only work through so fast. The idea didn't die there, though. It spread, wearing different clothes. In Kansas City, Missouri, 4 veterans led by Brian Meyer founded the Veterans Community Project in 2016 and started building 240-square-foot tiny homes at zero rent, with a rule that residents work a case management plan while they live there. The average stay runs 335 days, with an 85% success rate getting people into permanent housing afterward. That one village has since become 6: Kansas City, Glendale, Arizona, Longmont, Colorado, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, St. Louis, and, as of late 2025, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, roughly 240 homes total, serving about 1,000 veterans in 2025 alone. In Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a nonprofit called Veterans Outreach of Pennsylvania broke ground in 2023 on a 15-unit village called Veterans Grove. Co-founder Tom Zimmerman put it plainly at the ribbon cutting: "These bricks and this mortar will be the foundation upon which we will rebuild lives." And the whole system these local efforts plug into, the January point-in-time count that produces every one of these statistics, has been quietly running, city by city, without interruption, every winter for almost 2 decades. A counting exercise nobody watches on television has outlasted most of the programs it counts. Before we get to what the people who actually live in these units say about them, I want to pause for one thing. If a channel that tracks stories like this, the ones that don't get network coverage, just local news and a non-profit newsletter, is useful to you, following along costs nothing, and means you don't have to go digging for the next one yourself. So what do people actually say once the segment wraps and the camera crew packs up? Judging by what the people who run these programs report back, it tends to come down to 3 things. First, the physical relief. Harman's 50 below insulation claim, the locked door, the mini fridge, get mentioned more than you'd expect, because after months outside, a working heater is not a minor detail. Second, and more often, it's not the object people bring up, but the fact that somebody bothered. Harman says volunteers call him constantly asking to be scheduled, unprompted, and he calls that the thing that keeps him going, along with his own PTSD, because helping a brother or sister is, in his words, the whole point. Third, and this is the one caseworkers emphasize, the unit itself rarely gets credit for the ending. What gets credit is what the unit buys time for. The VA paperwork, the counseling intake, the job placement, the actual apartment lease 6 or 8 months later. The trailer is the thing people remember first and talk about least. There's an assumption worth naming directly, that this is a big city problem, a Los Angeles or San Diego or Skid Row problem, solved by big city budgets. Boothbay Vets has delivered trailers to Caribou, near the Canadian border, and to Eastport, population under 1,300, the literal easternmost city in the country. Maine's entire statewide veteran homeless count, 115 people in a state of 1.4 million, is smaller than the guest list at a decent wedding. Rural veteran homelessness doesn't trend on social media, and a lot of the men building the trailers, Harman included, are Vietnam-era veterans in their 70s, not the young post-9/11 population most people picture when they hear the phrase homeless vet. Now, the honest counter-argument, because a program with this much positive coverage deserves 1. Critics inside the homelessness services field, not outside it, will say a trailer with no plumbing and a 5-day intended stay is a way for a state or a non-profit to look like it's solving veteran homelessness without actually building the one thing that would: permanent, affordable units, at scale, in a housing market where, as one Portland Veterans Services director put it, the number of units we have access to is really less than what we need. That's a fair hit, and it's not really deniable. Boothbay Vets, by design, isn't housing. It's a waiting room with a heater. But the rebuttal isn't emotional, it's arithmetic. A 2021 study of Los Angeles and Silicon Valley found chronic unsheltered homelessness costs the public roughly $38,000 a year per person in emergency rooms, jail beds, and ambulance calls, compared to about $15,000 for permanent supportive housing. The same dynamic shows up in Denver, in Central Florida, everywhere researchers have looked. A cheap, fast bridge that gets someone off pavement and into that cheaper system sooner isn't a substitute for permanent housing. It's the thing that makes permanent housing reachable at all, instead of someone cycling through an ER for another 18 months while a housing list slowly moves. On an ordinary Saturday, none of that theory is visible. A retired Elks Club volunteer is showing a formerly incarcerated framing crew how to square a trailer door before winter. Somebody's propped a folding chair outside a finished unit and is drinking coffee in the cold sun, in no hurry to go anywhere. It looks, for about 20 minutes, like a job site and not a crisis response. Harman says the thing that sticks with him isn't any number. It's what veterans tell him once they're actually inside one, small and cold-proof and locked from within. It's small, but to someone who's been living on the street, it's a palace. Back on that frontage road outside Bakersfield, the two scenes from the opening were never really about a van and a truck bed. They were about 3 smaller things: a door that locks, an address to put on a form, and someone who calls to check whether you need anything. Thorvegen had almost nothing when he gave his own van away, and it changed hands within days, but the habit it started hasn't stopped moving since. The whole difference, materials-wise, between sleeping exposed on that frontage road and sleeping locked, warm, and off the ground costs about what a decent used pickup truck goes for on a used car lot. Not a fortune, not nothing, just within reach of an ordinary person who decides to do something about it. If stories like this one are useful to you, it's worth sticking around. Next time, a group of architecture students in Chicago who built insulated tiny houses for under $2,000 each for people living in a tent encampment, and the stop work order the city slapped on them before the first hard freeze over paperwork nobody involved had ever heard of.